Hey, welcome to episode 12 of the Ascendancy podcast. I'm Austin.
Chris.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about veganism and pacifism and how the two do not equate, and being vegan does not entail being a pacifist. So, to get started, what is veganism? It is the principle that animals shouldn't be exploited. And what is pacifism? Pacifism is a belief that violence, including war, is unjustifiable and that conflicts should be resolved through peaceful means. At a surface level, it looks like it would be related to veganism and it does look like an altruistic stance. But when we take a look at it a bit deeper, what does it actually entail? It means not having the ability to stand up to conflict, to oppression, to injustice with violence. If we look at history and we look at, for example, the freedom of enslaved people and we look at historical genocides, violence, of course, allowed for these conflicts to end. And violence is a fundamental aspect of our society that keeps people who have criminal and ill intentions at bay. Because when it comes down to it, criminality is ceased or is potentially ceased with the threat of law enforcement, with the institutional threat of violence. And it's just representative of this reality that not all people play by the same rules. Some people are willing to harm others, exploit others, prey on others, and violence can potentially keep these people at bay. Now, we are not pro violence, and we're also not pro violence in the liberation of animals. We take an educational approach because we ultimately want to change people's minds. But ultimately, when it comes to justice, when it comes to doing what is right, we should have the ability to defend ourselves, to defend others, to defend our loved ones, because other people are potentially willing to commit violence. Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for getting us started on this episode, and those are some good ways of explaining it. And when it comes to the vegan movement and in general, I do see this idea proliferated where people are, their eyes are open to the horrific reality of how animals are exploited and violated in agriculture and other industries. And it's a simple step to then go forward and say, well, all violence should be rejected. Ahimsa, we should be harmless and never cause harm to anyone or anything. And I think that's a misguided belief set, and that's kind of what we're going into today. Because, like Austin said, the world is the way it is. There are people who are willing to be predatory and exploitative to get what they want. And if you're just going to be, hapless and harmless and unwilling to defend yourself or your loved ones and not train your ability to be violent if you need to, then you're going to be run over and stepped on and possibly killed, unfortunately, in the world that we live in. So that's kind of what we're going into in this episode, the importance of rejecting absolute pacifism. And we're not advocating for violence, like Austin said, but there are circumstances where we must be capable of violence, but of course, controlling that and only exercising it when it's necessary. And we shouldn't just be, harmless and totally feeble as vegans. So, yeah.
Absolutely, well said. And I think the idea, the premise of nonviolence as a virtue is essentially falsely claiming that harmlessness is somehow virtue. Being unable to defend oneself is somehow good. If we look at the concepts of good and of bad, of evil, they aren't necessarily tethered to violence or one's capacity for violence. Like, for perspective, someone can be wholly evil, of course, and be nonviolent and still exploit and oppress others, and one can be good and potentially use violence as a means to stop evil in the world, to stop the oppression of others. And when it comes down to it, when a person is fully committed to nonviolence and people who are predatory are willing to harm others, take from them, take their freedoms away, if you are not willing to potentially be violent when it comes down absolutely to it, you are essentially telling these individuals that what they do can proceed indefinitely unchecked. And we can see this when it comes to historical conflict. We can see instances throughout history of civilizations and peoples defending themselves when the time came, whether their villages were under siege or whether their countries were being invaded. There are times where violence is necessary for a civilization, a country, a society, a people to defend themselves from an attacker, from an invader. And in the same light, it can be crucial to defend ourselves when the time comes using violence, or our loved ones, our family. If someone breaks into our house or potentially, tries to harm us in some way, if we're able to be violent to defend ourselves, we can protect our own rights and our own liberty, and we can potentially do the same for animals as well. We have to be capable to defend ourselves so we can live to fight a day to make a difference in educating people to abolish animal exploitation. So, my personal view is that being harmless isn't a virtue. If you look at most people on Earth, I think most people right now have a predatory disposition. I think that the amount of people or the number of people who are predatory or who are cruel or who are evil is quite high. I think there are relatively few people who are morally good and are doing something to make a difference. And when it comes to just power in general and the ability to change the world, do you want people who are evil, who are predatory, who are cruel to have all of this power stacked in their favor? Or do you want people who are good to also have some capacity for violence, for self-defense, to do the right thing, and stand up to the evil forces of the world? I personally think that if you're a good moral agent, you're a good person, you should do everything you can to stack the odds in your favor personally, to defend yourself, to defend what's right, to defend your loved ones, to defend your family. I want good moral agents to be as capable of violence as possible when need be to defend themselves and others. And Chris, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's really well said. That's a good point that, when you stack up the violence capacities of evildoers, we need to make sure that, on the good side, the good team, we also are ready to defend ourselves and oppose that. So when it comes to my perspectives on like self-defense, combat, gun ownership, I think those are all very important to work on. So when it comes to the topic of guns, I know it's a divisive topic, but I am pro guns. I'm pro gun ownership. I won't comment on my status as a gun ownership, but I do think it's a good idea for vegans to get comfortable with firearms, to understand how to handle them, because they are an incredible tool for self-defense if you know how to use it properly. And when it comes to defending yourself, there's few things that are better than understanding how to use those tools. So there are also other ways of defending yourself. Obviously it's important to learn some type of martial art, some type of combat sport. I think those are valuable skills to have. Just knowing how to maneuver your body, knowing how to counter attacks from somebody. If someone was approaching you or your family, you would need to understand how to navigate that. There's also skills with, knowing how to diffuse situations and avoid conflicts from even happening in the first place. So just trying to not put yourself in positions where you're in a sketchy areas and stuff like that. So yeah, personally, I do some boxing twice a week, just kind of practicing throwing hands, knowing how to do that if push came to shove and I needed to throw some hands to defend myself or my loved ones, I could do it. I'm definitely not a pro boxer by any means, but I'm doing what I can in the gym just to practice that skill of being violent if I need to turn on a switch and just take heads off, if so to speak. So I think those are important. Man or woman, it's important to know how to to be fit, of course. to know how to move your body in space and how to deal with an attacker. And fitness is a huge aspect of this, because if you're fit and you have muscle and you appear competent, man or woman, you're less likely to be a victim to violence, to predation. So I think it's important to, be in the gym or doing calisthenics at home, doing your push-ups, your pull-ups, and just having a good level of strength. That's a great way to, avoid having to, use your protective skill set, because you're less likely to be preyed on. And I think it's important to be, of course, aware of your surroundings at all times, everywhere you go. Don't be scrolling away on your phone, just lost in the sauce with both earphones in. If you don't know what's going on around you, you don't know what sketchy people are around and keeping tabs on you, it's not a good look. So it's important to just be aware of your surroundings and always looking out. So those are some of my perspectives on self-defense and combat and all that. So what do you think, Austin, about that?
Yeah, well said. And uh, gun ownership is a controversial one, in general, especially within the vegan movement. I'm personally a gun owner, and I've actually heard someone say, "How can you be vegan and be pro-gun?" I think guns to the individual are like the nuclear option for self-defense. They have massive life-changing or potential life-changing alterations. If you have to be in a situation where you use a firearm, you can potentially kill someone, end someone's life, end up in prison, have a situation escalated where you can potentially be killed as well. So I think it's a decision to absolutely not take lightly. Another perspective is that whatever is the maximum ability that we can have to defend ourselves in a civilization, I think we should seek that opportunity, whether it be a knife in one jurisdiction or a gun in the other. People who are criminals, who have foul intent, who have bad intentions, for you and for others, they're not going to play by the rules. So because of that, I think every individual should maximize their capacity to defend themselves and to defend their family. So my perspective is that if I'm somewhere where guns are legal, I'm going to be a gun owner. It's as simple as that. When it comes to the politics of it, I don't care so much to get into it. But my personal perspective is that one should defend themselves to the utmost of their ability. Now, when it comes to violence and combat fighting overall, I think a good protocol is to avoid it, to use reason a bit where we can, to be mindful of our surroundings, to just avoid potential altercations. Because with every punch, even a punch, you punch someone in the face, you can potentially give them brain damage, or they can fall and hit concrete and get, a life-altering injury. Or it's even quite common for people to accidentally be killed, in like a regular street fight. So violence always has, potential negative repercussions for both the person doing it and the person on the receiving end. As such, I think it's good to avoid it wherever possible. Because let's look at it this way: you get into a little skirmish with someone, or someone disrespected you, or you disrespected them, etc., and it comes to blows. Let's say you beat that person's ass and you knock them out, and you feel, big and bad, and you feel tough after doing this. But did you actually change their mind? Did you actually do something to have other people's perception in the world now align with yours? You know, Probably not. They're just going to be resentful, or maybe a bit humbled after it, but it doesn't do anything to change the world. So as such, I think violence should be relegated to self-defense and defense of others, rather than something taken lightly, because ultimately, kindness, a bit of kindness is, social lubrication. Sometimes it's good to bite the bullet, be humble, try to be the bigger person intellectually. But if it comes down to it, someone has us cornered, or someone's potentially hurting someone we care about, at that point, then yeah, use whatever means are at someone's disposal to get out of the situation and come out alive, on the other end if it comes down to it. So that's my perspective on that. But so much can be done just by avoiding bad situations, being respectful of people, being vigilant, standing up straight and confident, and being socially dominant can really go a long way to ward off people who are predatory or who are, just looking to start trouble. If they're intimidated by your physical presence, they're going to be less likely to go after you relative to someone else. I mean, I personally train martial arts um, lackadaisically. I'm not like someone who's a regular practitioner. I was in the past with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and my girlfriend is a martial artist, so we train on occasion. But it is good, to be physically competent, to be able to defend ourselves, when the need arises, whether armed or whether unarmed. But, that's my overall perspective. Avoid when possible, but be ready to defend yourself and others when need be. Chris, you have any more perspective on that, when it comes to combat and potentially de-escalating a situation?
Yeah, you made some good points, and it reminded me of a concept. A few things I want to say. The first is that there's a saying that goes, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war." And this basically means it's better to be prepared for when the shit hits the fan. During peacetime, it's like you could chill and not use that capacity for violence and your skill set. But if shit hits the fan, you're ready to go, as opposed to the other way around. If you're a gardener in a war, you're useless. Like your family's being killed, your village is being pillaged, and you have no skills to defend yourself, then you're screwed. So it's a lot better to be ready for those altercations than not. And also, it brings to mind how usually it's the people who are the most competent, the most capable of violence who don't use it, because that they know who they are, they're secure in their skin, they're not going to be seeking violence, seeking fighting. It reminds me of a video I think about a month ago. There was like a well-known UFC fighter at a sports contest or something, and some fan was just yelling at them like a madman, just screaming at them, like threatening to fight them. And the UFC fighter was just standing there chilling, just like looking at him, just like listening to him yell. And he didn't like have to puff his chest and say, "Do you know who I am? Like, I'm this fighter with this record. Like, I could beat your ass." Like, he was just standing there chilling because he was in control of his emotions and in control of himself, to not use that violence, because he knew this is just some stupid heckler, and if I chose to beat his ass, I'd probably be in jail for 5-10 years. So I'm just gonna chill. I'm just gonna walk away, and then security kind of like escorted him away or something like that. So it's important to, like we said, not seek violence, and to be confident in your skill set, and to always try to diffuse situations and avoid things from escalating. Like, all the people who are really good at self-defense, they don't want to fight. They don't necessarily want to, go through the drama of legal battles and litigations and potentially jail time. They're going to try to avoid fighting at all costs. But of course, if it's absolutely necessary, they will throw down. And another tool I think that's useful is pepper spray. So if you're not comfortable with firearms, or you're not able to get them, but possibly if pepper spray is legal in your jurisdiction, I think it's a really effective tool for de-escalating situations and dissuading any harmful attackers. Because what it does is it just totally messes with their mucous membranes in their eyes, their nasal passage, their mouth. And if you get one with good enough concentration, it can really incapacitate them. And it's a non-lethal defense tool, so no one's ever died from pepper spray. And it's just extremely uncomfortable. It's blinding, and it'll diffuse the situation very quickly. There's a good reason why police officers and security guards carry pepper spray, because it's kind of like that halfway between full-scale nuclear using a firearm and potentially killing someone. And then, it's that halfway where you can diffuse a situation and, it doesn't kill anyone. It just is very painful. It takes like a few hours of washing it out with water and soap to get it out. So that's definitely a useful tool I wanted to mention. Maybe for any women that are watching that aren't comfortable with like becoming an MMA fighter or carrying a firearm. I think pepper spray is a great idea, and it's a good reason why a lot of women already carry it on their person. So yeah, those are a few last things I want to touch on.
No, that's a great point. Pepper spray can be super useful and, of course, doesn't have the lethal ramifications. And I personally know of people who defended their lives with pepper spray successfully from a large group of potential attackers. So, highly, highly effective, very affordable, very easy to use. I think that's a good option. But just to do a recap of this episode, is that veganism is just a principle that man shouldn't exploit animals. So many individual vegans really have a strong desire to take all of their other values, philosophies, stances, and intertwine it into veganism, which is just not what it is. It's a standalone principle, a standalone concept. You can be a pacifist and you can be vegan. I would argue you can't be a pacifist and be a non-vegan, of course, but you don't have to fall into any other specific ideologies or beliefs to embrace a perspective that animals don't deserve to be used or commodified. You can be against animal exploitation and you can be a practitioner of martial art. You can defend yourself and your loved ones. And I think if you do have that perspective, I think you're a good person and you should take your safety and your security seriously, and you should be looking out for yourself because you're someone who matters and can make a difference for all of the beings that we share this planet with. So that's my closing perspective on that. And you can absolutely stand up for animals, stand up for justice, for sentient beings, and have varying ideas. But hey, thank you for watching. We appreciate your time in this episode and share your thoughts below. What do you think about this? Peace.
Peace out.